Okay, let's just recap before we get started. So first of all, we had the 3080 10GB, and there was also the 3090 24GB, all nice and straightforward to begin with. But then there was the 3080 Ti, which was 12GB. There was also a 3080 12GB, so non-Ti. There are rumours of a 3080 Ti 20GB, but now we've got the 3090 Ti 24GB. Nvidia, how many high-end cards do you need? Alright guys, Dominic here for Kit Guru, and at long last, Nvidia is finally launching its new flagship GPU, the RTX 3090 Ti. Of course, this was originally announced back at CES 2022, but it's been radio silence ever since then, with plenty of rumours swirling about potential issues with the memory. That does all seem to be sorted, however, as 3090 Ti is indeed launching today, and we have not one but two cards to look at. We have the MSI Supreme X, as well as the Palit GameRock OC. Let's first remind ourselves though what makes this card a 3090 Ti as opposed to the regular 3090. Both are using the GA102 GPU, but the 3090 Ti is actually a fully populated version, meaning it has two extra SMs, giving it 256 more CUDA cores, a handful of extra tensor cores and texture units, as well as two more RT cores. Clock speed has also seen a bump up to 1860 MHz, and that's coupled with brand new 21 gigabit per second GDDR6X memory modules, which help increase memory bandwidth to over 1 terabyte a second. As has been well publicised, however, all of that comes at a significant increase to power draw, with a rated total graphics power figure of 450 watts. As for pricing, well, we were told in the UK the MSRP is going to start at £1,879. Both cards we're looking at today, however, are of course factory OC models with even higher MSRPs. MSI, for instance, told us that this 3090 Ti Supreme X has an MSRP of £1,799.99. But considering that the 3090 non-Ti Supreme X is already listed at £2,000 on Overclockers UK, I think we can safely say that real-world street pricing for the Ti model is going to be even higher. For the Palit GameRock OC, the MSRP has been set even higher, at £2,179. Again though, we're already seeing existing 3090 GameRock sitting around £2,050 online, so I wouldn't be surprised to see real-world street pricing even higher still. It's certainly not going to be an affordable GPU then, but what sort of performance is on offer? To find out, we deployed our regular GPU test system that is powered by MSI. So this is built around Intel's i9-12900K CPU, and that's paired with the MSI Meg Z690 Unify motherboard with 32GB of ADATA XPG Lancer DDR5 memory clocked at 6000 MHz. It's also worth making clear that resizable bar is enabled for all GPUs, and we're also using the MSI MPG 321UR QD monitor. All of our data has been collected fresh over the last week, and we're using the 22.3.1 driver for all of our AMD GPUs, and for all of our Nvidia GPUs we're using the 511.79 driver, except for the 3090 Ti, where Nvidia supplied us with the 512.16 driver. The final thing to say is that for the bulk of my games testing, I am focusing on the MSI Supreme X model, but we will compare it to the Palit GameRock OC later on in this video. It's just worth pointing out that this is a factory overclock model, so performance might be 1% or 2% higher than if we had a reference clocked card. With all of that out the way though, we're going to kick off the game benchmarks with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. At 1440p, we can see the RTX 3090 Ti delivers 105 FPS on average. As AMD GPUs do so well in this game, however, That only puts it level with the RX 6800 XT, and it's 16% slower than the RX 6900 XT, while it's also only 6% faster than the vanilla RTX 3090. At 4K though, the 3090 Ti does climb to the top of the chart, but it's not much faster than the 6900 XT, delivering just 4% better performance. That makes it 9% faster than the RTX 3090, and still only 13% faster than the RX 6800 XT. Moving on to Cyberpunk 2077, we do see more from the 3090 Ti in this title. Even at 1440p, we can see more of the performance difference that we were hoping for, as the 3090 Ti is coming in 12% faster than the 3090 and 11% faster than the 6900 XT. The fact that it is still only hitting 91 FPS really shows you just how demanding this game is at ultra settings. At 4K as well, the 3090 Ti can stretch its legs further, delivering an extra 15% performance over the 3090, and it's got a much more impressive 25% lead over the RX 6900 XT as well, even though the frame rate is still sitting below 50 FPS. Dying Light 2 doesn't show us as impressive results as we saw in Cyberpunk, but the 3090 Ti is still sitting at the top of the chart, delivering 126 FPS at 1440p. That puts it 9% ahead of the RTX 3090 and 15% clear of the RX 6900 XT, though do remember this is an Nvidia sponsored title. As for 4K performance, here the 3090 Ti delivers an extra 7 FPS compared to the RTX 3090, which may not sound like much, but it is a 10% improvement. We're also looking at another 25% lead for the 3090 Ti over the RX 6900 XT. Let's move on to Forza Horizon 5 though, and I do think the results here are particularly interesting. For starters, Nvidia GPUs get an absolute kicking by their AMD counterparts in this title, with the RTX 3090 Ti 9% slower than even the RX 6800 XT at 1440p, and that makes it 16% slower than the 6900 XT. I'm not sure if this game just isn't as well optimized for the Ampere architecture as it should be, but the 3090 Ti isn't even scaling well against the 3090. Even at 4K, it's just 4% faster on average, still making it 7% slower than the AMD 6900 XT. That actually means this is the only game I tested where the 3090 Ti can't beat the 6900 XT at 4K. God of War is more favourable to Nvidia cards, however, and we do also see better scaling for the 3090 Ti here. At 1440p, it hits 131 FPS on average, making it 13% faster than the RTX 3090 and 21% faster than the RX 6900 XT. Up at 4K, it's now 30% faster than the 6900 XT and still a decent 14% margin ahead of the vanilla RTX 3090, with both AMD GPUs sitting at the bottom of the chart. We'll finish up then with Total War Warhammer 3. AMD GPUs definitely struggle in this title, and at 1440p we can see the RTX 3090 Ti is 33% faster than the RX 6900 XT, though compared to the 3090 non-Ti, we're looking at a difference of 11%. Up at 4K, the 3090 Ti is still 13% faster than the RTX 3090, but it absolutely obliterates the 6900 XT, delivering almost 50% more performance. I do have to say, however, that this is probably more about the 6900 XT underperforming than it is about the 3090 Ti being super fast. That is where I'm going to leave the individual game benchmarks though, as honestly, even after going over just those 6 titles, you really do get the picture. I did test 12 games as I always do, however, so if you want to see all of our benchmark data, including the 1080p results, you can find that in the written review over on kitguru.net. For now though, let's take a look at the 12 game average performance. So overall, the RTX 3090 Ti is the fastest GPU we have ever tested at every resolution. That said, we know the RX 6900 XT does best, relatively speaking, at the lower resolutions, and at 1440p, the RTX 3090 Ti is only 6% faster on average compared to the AMD GPU, so it's not a massive increase by any means. Compared to the RTX 3090 at the same resolution, we are seeing a 10% average improvement. As we've come to expect from Ampere though, the RTX 3090 Ti really does best at 4K, where we see the RX 6900 XT also falls off, resulting in an extra 16% performance from Nvidia's new flagship compared against the current AMD flagship. Compared to the vanilla RTX 3090, the new Ti model is 12% faster on average. Do remember though that our MSI 3090 Ti is a factory overclock model, while our 3090 runs at stock clocks, so you can probably deduct a couple of percentage points when taking that into account. Rounding out our games benchmarks, I do also want to take a quick look at ray tracing, but the performance scaling here is pretty much what you'd expect. Cyberpunk, for instance, shows a 15% improvement for the 3090 Ti over the 3090 at 1440p, while of course it is crushing the 6900 XT, which we know really struggles with all the ray trace effects in this game. Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition shows us the single biggest performance increase for the 3090 Ti over the 3090 that we saw from across all of our testing, and that's because there's a 17% boost to frame rates at 4K, while the 3090 Ti is also over twice as fast as the 6900 XT. Resident Evil Village is more typical of overall performance, however, as we see a 14% increase to the frame rate relative to the RTX 3090. It's time to shake things up a bit though, so we're going to take a closer look at the two cards we have in today before putting them head to head across a variety of benchmarks. Starting with the MSI Supreme X then. This is using the same overall styling as other Supreme X cards we have looked at, with a plastic and metal shroud along with a metal backplate. The main difference is it's just been scaled up to better deal with its 480 watt power limit. We do still have three 100mm Torx 4.0 fans cooling the super thick heatsink, as this thing is a proper 3.5 slot card. It's also using the new 16-pin PCIe Gen 5 power connector, though an adapter is included so you can use three 8-pin connectors instead. MSI has also outfitted the Supreme X with a dual BIOS switch, so you can choose between either the gaming BIOS or the silent BIOS. As for the Palit GameRock OC, this is again the same design as the regular 3090 GameRock that we have reviewed in the past, but it is that bit bigger and will take up 3 slots in your case. The shroud is honestly easily the most eye-catching part of the design, however, with its absolutely bombastic RGB light show that you'll probably either love or hate. There's also three 90mm fans in the shroud, and again the new PCIe Gen 5 power connector, but with another adapter supplied to use three 8-pin connectors. Palit also includes a dual BIOS switch with a choice between the performance or silent BIOS modes. I do really want to make clear, however, just the sheer size of these two cards, as they are honestly both absolute monsters. That's because both models actually measure in at over 60mm thick, and they're easily over 30cm long. So just to put that into perspective, I've stacked them up here against the 3080 Ti Founders Edition, and honestly, both of them make that card look very average. It really does just go to show what happens when the power draw is cranked so high. Both cards also come with support brackets too, as the GameRock weighs just under 1.9 kilos, while the Supreme X is over 2.1 kilos. As for gaming performance between the two though, I was focusing on the Supreme X for my benchmarks earlier, but that's really only because gaming performance between the two is very, very similar. The Supreme X does have a slightly higher factory overclock, hitting 1950MHz compared to 1890 MHz for the Palit, but honestly we're only looking at a 1 to 2% performance difference in the games I benchmarked at 4K, so you're hardly losing much by opting for the GameRock OC. To really illustrate that point, here we are looking at both cards and their average operating clock speed. As we've said, MSI Supreme X is the fastest, but only by around 45 MHz in the real world, which is only enough to affect gaming performance by 1 to 2% as we've shown, but I really don't think it's something you notice when actually gaming. As for the thermals, here we have tested both BIOS modes on each card, but to be honest, there's not much difference between even the best and the worst results. The Supreme X does run coolest out of the box when using the gaming BIOS, with a GPU hotspot of 81 degrees, but at worst, using its silent BIOS, the hotspot only hit 87 degrees, so really not much of a difference. Palit's results are right in the middle of the two, with just a 1 degree difference between its performance and silent BIOS. Still on the topic of thermals, GDDR6X memory temperatures are also kept well in check. I honestly wasn't sure if the 21 gigabit per second modules would run noticeably hotter, but at least with the two cards I have tested here, memory thermals are absolutely fine. The G6X memory on the 3080 Ti Founders Edition, for instance, actually runs well into the 90 degree range, and that's slower memory to begin with, so we really can't complain about the performance here from these two 3090 Ti's, although obviously this will vary depending on which AIB you are looking at. Moving on to noise levels though, one consequence of the 3090 Ti being such a high powered GPU is that all of the cards we tested were audible under load. Some were quieter than others, with MSI's silent BIOS delivering the lowest noise levels, but even at 38 decibels it was still audible to my ear. It's still not loud of course, but you may just have to adjust your expectations. To cool over 450 watts of power is going to require higher fan speeds than if this were a 350 watt GPU, for instance. Removing noise levels from the equation though, we do also look at noise normalized temperatures, with fan speeds set to output at 40 decibels. The MSI Supreme X did run the coolest here, but only by 2 degrees when looking at the GPU hotspot temperature. We also tested both BIOS for the Palit GameRock OC, as the P BIOS does have a 10 watt higher power target than the S BIOS, but even that didn't make a difference to thermals once we had set the same fan speed for both BIOS. Noise normalized memory temperatures also show both Palit BIOS modes performing the same, with the G6X memory running 4 degrees hotter than on the Supreme X. We of course can't go any further in this review without talking about power draw though, starting with our total system power draw using our i9 12900K test system. Here we saw usage exceed 710 watts using the MSI Supreme X, and that actually makes it the single most power hungry GPU I have ever tested. Now the Palit GameRock OC does have a slightly lower power target, but even then, at 680 watts total system power draw, this is a lot of power for a single card system. I do also like to look at power draw of just the graphics card, where we're using Nvidia's PCAT tool to isolate it from the rest of the system. As the figures shown here are actually 12 game averages taken over all of the 12 games we tested, we're only going to be focusing on the MSI Supreme X. Despite that card having a 480 watt power target, the power draw at 4K actually averages out at just over 460 watts, so slightly lower than its rated target. Interestingly, this is actually because a few games, including Forza Horizon 5 and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, actually show sub 400 power draw even at 4K, which does bring down the average. Even so, this is still a lot of juice for a single card, and it also shows a 30% increase to power draw versus the RTX 3090. Of course, that has an absolutely massive effect on overall efficiency, where the RTX 3090 Ti Supreme X offers the worst performance per watt of all the cards we have tested. We can see it is 9% less efficient than the RTX 3080, but a massive 26% behind the RX 6900 XT. Of course, we did also try our hand at a bit of manual overclocking, though interestingly, neither card actually has an adjustable power limit slider, so we were unable to push power draw even higher in pursuit of higher clocks. Still, for the MSI Supreme X, we're able to add 110 MHz to the GPU and 1270 MHz to the memory, though the GameRock OC didn't reach quite as high, as we could add an extra 75 MHz to the GPU and 1110 MHz to the memory. Those overclocks saw performance improve by a handful of percent, typically between 4 to 7% in the games I retested, so that's fine I guess, but it's nothing super exciting, and it really does go to show the 3090 Ti has been delivered pretty close to its limits. So there we have it, that's everything I'm going to look at in my review for the RTX 3090 Ti, and honestly I can't say I'm too surprised with the results we have seen. Considering the bump to core count, clock speed and memory speed, an average performance increase of 12% over the regular RTX 3090 seems about right I would say, though do bear in mind both of the cards we tested in this video are factory overclock models, so that difference might get slightly smaller if we were testing reference against reference. Whether or not that amount of extra performance is going to interest you though really does depend. On the one hand, you could say it is very simple. The RTX 3090 Ti is the fastest consumer GPU on the market, so for those who just want the best of the best and really don't care about anything else, then this is the GPU to get. On the other hand though, an extra 12% of performance isn't exactly massive in my opinion, and that number does actually get smaller at 1440p, where we saw just a 10% performance differential. Considering that power draw has also gone up by over 30%, we are looking at a big backward step in terms of power efficiency, which is particularly noticeable when electricity prices are about to hit an all-time high here in the UK. The last point to mention as well is of course pricing, but need we really say anything here? The 3090 Ti was only ever going to be a GPU for the most cash-rich of enthusiasts, and I'd expect to see real-world street pricing at well over £2,000. For this card's target market, however, I just don't think any of that really matters, as the 3090 Ti has met its primary goal of being the fastest GPU on the market. Just don't be surprised when that all changes with the launch of the RTX 40 series later this year. That is where I'm going to leave this review then guys, so if you liked it please do toss me a thumbs up, but most of all let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you're someone who's thinking about buying one of these GPUs, I really do want to hear from you. You can also subscribe if you haven't already and ding that notification bell, and why not come chat with us over on our Discord server, which is linked in the description. While there, you can also find a link to our merch store, and if you're feeling particularly generous, you can even consider backing us on Patreon, where you can see some of our content early and get access to exclusive giveaways. That's been it though guys, I'm Dominic for Kit Guru, and I'll see you in the next video.